Okay, it being 6:30, I'll call to order the meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. Today is Monday, February 24th, 2020. We're at the Oregon Senior High School Innovation Center. Ms. Heights, could you call the roll?
Ms. Feeney? Ms. Oderico? Ms. Flanagan? Mr. Pankratz? Ms. Bijak? Mr. LeBrun? Mr. Zach?
Present. Board has a quorum. I have noticed that the meeting has been appropriately noticed under Wisconsin Open Meetings Law. A copy of that notice will be with Ms. Heights if anyone wishes to inspect that. We have a long agenda tonight. That includes our normal items. Action items, we have 2 public hearings with respect to separate issues of detachment and requests to attach into the Oregon School District. Some discussion about our board committees, discussion about a pool and athletic field study. Discussion items, we'll have a report from the School Start End Time Work Group. We'll have a presentation from Andy on the 5-year budget plan, and then several informational items. So we're going to try to move along the meeting expeditiously because of the length of the calendar. But before we do that, Andy, could you pull up a picture on Friday? I had the privilege of going to a celebration, the kickoff for the Wisconsin Association of School Boards centennial year. On February 16th of 1921, about 30 board members from around the state traveled to Madison, which was no small feat in those days to get there, to discuss ways that collectively school boards could get together to enhance education for boys and girls across Wisconsin. So on Friday, that was the kickoff of the WASB, our organization, which we belong to, for that effort. I was proud to be there. Our firm is legal counsel for WASB, and I write the legal comment that you guys see in there. So I was there in that capacity, but also as a board member. So that's me with John Ashley. John had amazing words to kick that year off, and noted that the concern in 1921 was to enhance the education for all students, boys and girls across the state, and a principle of equity. And he said how much that rings true today. And so this year, I think you'll be seeing more on our centennial. The notion that we as school board members play a really critical role in the education of boys and girls across the state, and WASB plays a significant role in assisting us, and you'll see a large focus on equity. And as we heard at the convention, a number of the leaders in that effort back in 1921 were women. And so they collected, about the 30 people that were, collected $31 for their initial dues to work with WASB, and it's grown exponentially since then. So keep that in mind as we go along, and the convention next year in January will be a big celebration for 100 years of people working together as boards to enhance education throughout the state of Wisconsin. So thanks, Andy. You can take the picture of John and me down now. All right, our agenda tonight, A, consent calendar. Is there anything on the consent calendar that anybody wishes to have removed? Oh, we got to approve the agenda. Yeah, okay. Thank you. I just jumped into my picture first. Yeah. Is there a second? Okay. Any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We have an agenda. Now with the consent calendar, is there any item on the consent calendar that any member wishes to have removed? Okay, then I would need approval of the items on the consent calendar. Is there a second?
Can you make a note, Steve? I'll abstain from minutes as
Yep.
I was not present at the meeting.
Yep. Pursuant to board protocol, you can abstain and still vote on the remaining items, and you will be noted in the minutes of having abstained with respect to approval of the last meeting's minutes. We have a number of donations. Reuben for Kids donated $250 for OMS band activity. Jeff Knockreiner donated $4,200 for Prairie View classroom furniture. There was an anonymous gift of $400 for clothes and toys for a student at Brooklyn Elementary. Edward and Ferguson donated $2,000 for OMS band activity. And the Draper family, Irene, Carla, and Dwayne, donated almost $800 for the Draper Family Scholarship, and a significant of that is their husband and father, Manley Draper, was a long-term school board member in Oregon. So we thank all of those individuals and entities for their generous donations to the district. With that, could you call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Oderico?
Yes.
Ms. Feeney?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Mr. LeBrun?
Yes.
Mr. Zak?
Yes, motion carries. All the items on the consent calendar are approved. Board Policy 180.04 is establish an opportunity for the public to address the board at this point in time. We allocate 15 minutes for that purpose. How many people are here or registered? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so we have 7 people who have registered to speak. We'll go no later than 7 o'clock. At that time, we'll discontinue our communication from the public pursuant to board policy. So if those folks who are going to be speaking would limit their comments to 3 minutes, okay, to respect everybody else who wants to address the board. First one I have is Jen Daly. Could you come up? When you come up to the microphone, and Gina, could you see if that's on?
I just took it out.
Okay, so that's on. State your name and address and proceed. This is not an opportunity for the board to dialogue. It's an opportunity for the board to hear information. So if we don't dialogue back, that's just the nature of this part of the agenda pursuant to Wisconsin Open Meetings Law. Jen, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jen Daly, 2837 Birkin Street, Madison, which is the north end of the school district out by the new school and Wabisa Beach area. I'm in opposal of the lengthening of the school end time for the OMS and high school students. Living out by the beach, our ride for my daughter is currently at least an hour on the bus. So if they get out of school at 3:45, if it stays the same in terms of busing, she would not be home until nearly 5 o'clock at night. That whole bus ride in the wintertime would be in complete darkness. I sent the board an email today, including everyone. Safety is a non-negotiable. Somebody is going to get hurt. There is not a parent in this school district that can say we've got the best busing and the safest routes out there. Stuff happens. We need to protect our kids. With the other issue to the safety is there's a bus stop. She has to walk down the hill in the dark. Cars are rushing home. You're now messing with rush hour time. That's going to affect town here. It's going to affect all the houses that are being built out there. Highway MM is increased. Trying to get into town to bring preschool kids into school in the morning is a nightmare. That's only going to increase as those houses increase because people are going to be commuting. So we're only going to increase that traffic and make safety even a bigger issue by having those kids out there later at night. And I think that's the biggest issue for me right now, and the rest of them were addressed in my email to everyone. So thank you for your time.
Great, thank you, Jen. Jacob Bell. Hi, Jacob. If you could state your name and where you live.
My name is Jacob Bell, and I live at 2391 White Oak Trail, which is right by where the new elementary schools will
Great. Thanks for coming tonight.
be. I'd like to start off tonight by saying that moving the start time for high school students back to 8:30 won't end up helping any students at all, and it will in fact do quite the opposite. High schoolers are very busy people. Most of us work, play sports, participate in theater, or are committed to clubs and extracurriculars. Some even do a mixture of these things. A later start time will only hurt any students involved in anything outside of the normal school activities. For example, I work at Target, I'm involved in multiple clubs, and I do cross country and track. This new schedule will greatly affect my everyday life. To put some perspective on this, I plan on going to college and will have to pay for it all by myself, so I work to save money for my future. Ending the day at 3:45 will force me and hundreds of other students in my same position to start and end our shifts later in the day and further into the night in order to continue to support ourselves for our future. Furthermore, with sports and extracurricular activities, practices and meetings will be forced to start later in the day, only shifting our schedules back. Also, other schools in the area won't be starting later, or won't be ending later like we will, so we'll also be forced to miss more of our 9th hour classes. And most of the schedules that second, most of the schedules that I've seen for the high school schedule will cut our lunch to 30 minutes. The lunch line already takes close to 10 minutes to go through to get food and pay, and a cut to the total lunchtime will lead to more students staying for lunch, only adding more stress to our already overcrowded lines. The schedule this board has proposed will be hurtful to all of the students in Oregon School District. Although I can only speak to my experiences as a high school student, I don't think that the student body of an entire school district should suffer from the schedule change because their board misled referendum voters and disregarded transportation costs in their evaluations. I would urge the school board, who is supposed to represent the needs of students, to relook their scheduling and take a second look at adding the transportation funding that will solve the problem. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jacob. Amanda Payne.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hi. I live at 140 Lynn Trail in Oregon. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you for hearing the community's concerns and forming the work group that's investigating the scheduling issue. And thank you to all of the work group members who took time out of their schedules to do that. My hope is that the end result of all of this hard work is a schedule that's developmentally appropriate for all children. We need to keep the children as our main focus as we move forward. While factors like parents' work schedules, after-school activities, and whether some children wake up early anyways are impactful, every family is different, and what's convenient for one family won't be convenient for another. So all we can do is base decisions on what research shows to be the best for the health and well-being of our children. Earlier start times and longer school days are not in our elementary students' best interests, and with that being said, I support a 7:55 a.m. start time and a 6-hour 55-minute length of day for K through 4 students. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Katie Golio, did I get that right? You did. All right. Good, thank you. Where do you live?
I live at 233 Hotel Street in Brooklyn.
Great, go ahead.
So as he said, I am Katie Golio, and I am a stay-at-home mom to 3 little girls. And my oldest started in kindergarten this year at Brooklyn Elementary. And so we had our first experience this year of trying to get to the bus on time and get a kindergartner ready for school in the morning. And so, as a lot of us in the room know, there's quite a bit that goes into getting a kindergartner, a first grader, a second grader ready for the bus in the morning. You have to feed them breakfast. They can't just go and get breakfast themselves. You have to help them get dressed. They can kind of dress themselves, but sometimes they need a little assistance. And then especially during these winter months, we're putting on snow pants, we're putting on coats, we're putting on boots, and then we're putting on 14 different pairs of gloves because the first 13 pairs didn't work out quite right. So when I heard about us bumping this time frame up even earlier in the morning, it just literally brought me to tears because I'm imagining all these little peoples and all these homes of where they're trying to get their kids ready to go in the morning. And it's not only just like the 10 minutes, it's that you then have to bump up a 10-minute earlier bedtime, and you have to bump up maybe a 10-minute earlier dinner time. And if you have yourself or a spouse that isn't getting home from work until a little bit later, then they're hardly even getting able to see their kid at all. So I strongly believe that the time frame that we currently have in place is really beneficial to our kids, and I don't feel that lengthening their day by any amount of time is beneficial to the kids. And as Amanda said, we really need to put them first.
Thank you. Martha Klug. Martha, where are you? Martha? Oh.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Martha Klug, and I live at 351 Oakwood Drive. I first want to say that I respect and acknowledge the concerns stated by Jen and Jacob, and they're valid concerns, and I appreciated hearing them tonight. I also want to say that we can't have it both ways, unless maybe, as Jacob stated, the busing piece can be fixed with money, which I know the work group did look into extensively. So I don't know all of the details of that, but either age creates a very different developmentally appropriate needs, or it doesn't. And 10 minutes in the morning for younger children is no different than 10 minutes in the afternoon for older children. But if we're saying those 10 minutes will have the same impact on both groups of students, then we would have to agree that younger grades would benefit from a later start time as well. Based on research, though not yet adopted by the AAP, but valuable nonetheless, and based on my experiences as a mom and first grade teacher, the younger kids would benefit from starting school later. That isn't even one of the 9 options, and I understand why. Since the AAP has made a recommendation, they must have solid research. While starting middle and high school at 8:30 or later will pose some challenges, it is in the best interest of the students. Although my kids are 2, 6, and 7, I have been trying to pay attention to the pros and cons for all grade levels. Since the current busing situation requires the younger and older schools to start 45 minutes apart and not a minute less, we asked, I agree that high school should be the ones who get to start later. But please do not do this at the expense of the younger students, who will likely benefit from a later starter as well, and who are incredibly sensitive to the details of their daily schedule. Most of us feel that time moved very slowly when we were children and gradually is speeding up as we grow older. I can all but guarantee that my children back there feel like I've been talking for 10 minutes, but I hope most adults don't feel that way. Elementary schools have more Elementary schools have more than the recommended DPI minutes, and there is not one developmentally appropriate reason to add even a single minute, which, by the way, would seem like 10 minutes to most 5-year-olds. Adding any number of minutes is significant and challenging to their mental well-being. We are asking them to focus longer and be on for longer. Assigning these extra minutes to lunch and recess is not a good enough excuse. We should be giving young children plenty of time to eat and play during the time they already have. I don't want to see minutes taken from RCI. There are older kids with longer attention spans at a school full of great opportunities. But again, we can't have it both ways. We should prioritize what will affect more students, and we should prioritize a change that will be permanent over one that is temporary. Thank you.
Thank you, Martha. Jen Hans. Okay, you're not Jen.
I'm going to pull an audible, if that's all right.
Okay, you can.
My name is Ben Johnson. Jen Hans is my wife. And I just want to continue to reiterate some of the previous comments made by Martha, Katie, and Amanda. So 5th and 6th graders are still considered elementary school students per the Wisconsin Department of Instruction. They have the same number of required minutes as the 1st through 4th graders. I understand that the district chose to increase those minutes to accommodate additional offerings back when RCI was created. However, when the new middle school is built, 5th and 6th grade will merge back to the K-4 schedule, and 6th will merge into the 7th and 8th schedule. Therefore, I cannot understand why we are asking 1,500 K-4 students to add minutes to accommodate 2 grades whose minutes will be irrelevant in a few years. I understand that RCI is close to a few of your hearts and that your children go there, but please ask yourself if the decision to make 1,500 students adjust their schedule permanently forever to accommodate 2 grades with a temporary instructional minute discrepancy is really based in sound decision-making practice. I support keeping K-4 at a 6-hour and 50-minute daily schedule. Please assure that whatever you decide is best for all kids, not just a temporary few.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
Joni Summers. Hi, good evening.
My name is Joni Summers and I live at 350 Valdor Street. I'm here to talk about shortening the lunchtime to a half an hour. I have a niece who lives at home with me, And that 45-minute lunch period has been very vital to our family. There's many times that I would have to go home and watch her just for a short period between other caretakers. And it was very helpful to her mom. My little sister, Christelle, who's also in high school, does that quite a bit. Also, I have a cousin named Linus who goes to this high school, and he has a brother named Max with disabilities. He also needs lunch to go home to help out his mom, whether it be to load him into the car for an appointment or just to watch him for a little bit. Also, I've gone through a lot of health difficulties through high school, and that time has been very important to me to go home and just to rest and to nap. And I do understand that the schools have been very understanding and very helpful of allowing you to do that during different periods of the day, but it makes it easier to do it at lunch so that you don't have to miss other classes. So I'd use that to go home and nap or to even go to an appointment. It was enough time. I understand that both of these examples are minority things and that not everyone has to go home to take care of someone or to go to an appointment. But I still think that the school board should keep those in mind for the kids who do. The 45-minute lunch period was very helpful for me all through school, and it really helped to manage both of those things. That's all.
Great, thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wants to address the board? I've gone through the sign-in sheet. Okay, we've got a little bit of time left. Come on up and state your name and address.
I'll keep it short.
Sure.
My name's Tim Beers. I live at 5437 Whalen Road. I'd like to point out, it's my understanding that through the working group that there are some hardline requirements for the high school that they'd like met. They ideally want to end before 4 p.m. and have at least a 7-hour and 15-minute day. They could get both of these by starting at 8:40 and ending at 3:55. This would allow for a K6 start time at 7:55 a.m. Ideally, I'd like to see a developmentally and appropriate child-focused solution that K through 6 start their day at 8 a.m. and have only a 6-hour and 50-minute day. But in the spirit of compromise, I mean, we could safely say if they started at 7:55, they could have a 6-hour and 55-minute day, and I think everybody could be happy with that. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
We've got people signing the sheet.
Yeah, good. Come up. State your name and your address.
Sure. Name's Scott Garrison, 5708 Niagara Court. So obviously there's varied opinions here, but the number one priority for the board should be identifying what is best for all students, regardless of what grade they're in, and then finding a compromise that facilitates a common solution. Certainly the emphasis has been put on the studies showing that a later start time is better for the high school and middle school kids. And based on those AAP studies, it seems like the high school and middle schools will likely change from 8 a.m. to 8:30. Based on my experience as a high school kid once, I think that would have been great. I don't have kids in that grade range, but I certainly am looking forward to the benefit if that change occurs. But the problem is making that change for the high school and middle school kids sacrifices the start times for the K through 4 kids. There have been studies presented to this board that detail the ill effects of an earlier start time for K through 4, but those studies are going to be largely ignored if we move the start time for the K through 4 students to earlier than their current 8:05 start time. That said, obviously a compromise is necessary to find a solution that's for the greatest good for all the students, and which works with the 45-minute gap that's needed for busing. So the solution I would pose to the board is this. High school and middle school start at 8:40, ending at 3:55, with a 7-hour and 15-minute length of day. So if 8:30 is on the table, then certainly 8:40 does no harm. And the 3:55 end time is before the 4 p.m. cutoff and meets the 7-hour and 15-minute length of day that's been requested by the high school teachers. And then K through 4 and RCI start at 7:55 with a length of day of 6 hours and 55 minutes, ending at 2:50. So this works with the necessary 45-minute gaps for busing schedules. It's also budget friendly for the busing, and results in reduced wait times for the RCI middle school and high school students. Now, given the options available, this is the only solution that is developmentally appropriate for all ages, and any other solution is doing disservice to our youngest learners and does not hold with the values of whole child emphasis. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Heather?
Hi, good evening. My name is Heather Garrison. I live at 57, actually same address as he does. So, okay, it's not a surprise that I'm going to recommend a 7:55 a.m. start time for elementary, which is an 8:40 start time for high school. In December, I read Dr. Keller's statement, shared that with the board. You've all seen it. I also requested that it be included in the printout packet for the work group. It wasn't referenced in the slides, although boy, did we dig into a lot of data, and I was really disappointed that we didn't get into the research piece of it. So I'd like you to go back and read that letter one more time. I think it has a lot of really good information that we didn't quite get to before you make your final decision. But the short of it is that she's a professional. Dr. Keller, this is her area of focus, and we're largely ignoring it. I haven't heard of or seen any research that says, yes, starting elementary school children earlier is better. So I'm just kind of curious why we're so quick to put that research that shows that it is detrimental aside. There is also during the working group talk of these other school districts that start at 7:45 or 7:50, and it's okay, it's fine because that's what they do. But we have an opportunity to follow research and not to just do what another school district does because that's what they do. We want to do something that's right for kids. And so I understand that there are real world constraints, 45 minutes for busing, 7 hours and 15 minutes for high school, and something has to give. So I'm not here to say, yes, we should start at 8 a.m. or 8:05 or 8:10, but I think really the best thing that we can do for all children is a 7:55 a.m. start or 8:40 start for middle school and high school. Anything less than that is disregarding our littlest learners. So thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Seth Klug? And I'm going to guess you live at the same address as Martha, right, Seth?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Seth Klug. First off, I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak and potentially influence the decision impacting our youth. Studies show that older kids benefit from starting later, and I think it's great, but then it would make sense that they would also need to end later, right? Now, because an appropriate busing solution failed to be built into the referendum, older students need to start a little later to ensure that there's a 45-minute gap. You cannot penalize a majority of the students, our most impressionable students, and force the young children to go to school even earlier in the morning. I'm not going to claim to be an expert on the topic, but using common sense and parental experience, I know that starting younger kids earlier doesn't help. In fact, I feel pretty confident to say that it actually hurts them. Last night, one of my children asked what day it was. I told him it was Sunday, and he got quite emotional and asked if he had to go to school tomorrow. I said that he did, but pointed out some positive things that the day would hold for him. I then asked him why he didn't want to go to school, and he answered the same as he has all of kindergarten. It's just so long. It's just so long. So it's not a compromise that I'm seeking more just damage control for the younger students who are seeing no benefit to these proposals, just a negative impact. So again, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Seth. Jenny Brunens. Brunens? Okay. Okay, that's all right. What's your name?
Jennifer Hans.
Okay.
I'm at Vineyard Road in Fisher.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about the word compromise for a minute. You've heard it before in relation to the schedule change, and you will hear it a lot when presented with the work group recommendations. Imagine for a second that you are handed a plate of dirt and you're asked to eat it. Parents around you say it's not good for you to eat that dirt. Researchers say you shouldn't eat that dirt. Teachers tell you eating dirt will hurt you. So you beg and you plead, and you're finally told you only have to eat a quarter of the plate of dirt. Would you say that you have compromised and you've got a little good and a little bad? Or would you say that you are still being forced to eat a quarter plate of dirt? The word compromise in talking about what the elementary students will be doing if this new schedule adopted is inappropriate. They did not compromise. They are being forced to change to something we know is bad for them. Every other age group gets a good point and a pain point. Elementary gets 2 pain points. That isn't a focus on the whole child or a whole district. If you choose to move forward with his recommendations to start elementary earlier and lengthen their day, please stop using the word compromise. I want you to look at the little kids over there, and most of them have now gone to bed. I want you to think about what your elementary school experience was like. Was it like mine, where in kindergarten I went for half a day and got a nap in that time? Where you worked on social skills and very little academics, where we played? Today, kindergarten curriculum is what first and second grade once was decades ago. In fact, staff from OSD say that multiple times during the kindergarten orientation as if it's a good thing. We expect more listening, more sitting, demand more, add curriculum. Do we have smarter kids because of this? I don't think so. Do we do better on standardized tests because our kids can read earlier? Likely. But we for sure have more anxiety and depression in young kids than we've ever had. In fact, the district just added a mental health professional to help this issue. Obesity is an epidemic, and we are choosing to keep our kids in a classroom longer. Let's address the root of that issue. Let's stop this inch by inch, 5 minute by 5 minute approach in education because it isn't sustainable. We need to stop rationalizing every little small change because they do add up. In a vacuum, we can say it's just 5 minutes, but we've been saying it over and over again, and we've come to a tipping point. This change adds up to over a week of school in a year. Finally, we do not need more minutes. We need less curriculum. Please, when you are deciding how to vote on this change, ask yourself if what you are doing is good for our youngest kids. Is it that you are saying, they'll be fine? Because I hope we are holding a school district to a higher standard than fine. Let's shoot for good. Let's not gamble on our youngest learners. Let's not take away 10 or more minutes in the morning when they get to connect with their parents, when they get a good breakfast, when they have a chance for a calm morning instead of a bunch of yelling of get in the car now, get your boots on now. Please keep K4 at 6 hours and 50 minutes and ask the older grades to sacrifice 15 minutes at the end of their day so our youngest ones don't get 2-point pain points and nothing good. Thank you.
Thank you. And last, Kalina.
I'll try to make this short. My name is Kalena. I have a second grader and a kindergartner, and I, along with a lot of the other people you heard, have very similar opinions. So I'll try not to repeat myself too much or repeat what they said, but I do agree with everything that they have said about, keeping the elementary school day ideally at the 6 hour and 50 minutes that they are now. They currently are well over DPI requirements, which I think we've stated many, many times before. I will say I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the last 2 working group meetings, and I do appreciate that people took the time out of their busy schedules to meet and discuss all of these options. So that was, I think, a plus, a benefit for the school district to have that. One thing I will say, I guess, I was a little disappointed in the last meeting, in only the last 5 or 10 minutes, was the idea of a 7:50 start time and a 7-hour day brought up. There were a couple other options being thrown around, a 6:55 length of day with a start time of 7:50 or a 7:55 start time with a 7-hour day, and only in the last little bit with those 2 pieces kind of uncoupled, so voting occurred. Which, there wasn't any ill intent. However, what bothered me, and maybe this is just me, when the voting occurred, the only minutes that were put next to the length of day was how it would affect RCI. And for some reason, that bothered me, that was the only important piece to put up there when voting versus how it was going to affect the kindergartners, first, second, third and fourth graders as well. Now, again, I don't know why that was done, but I think that could have skewed voting. I don't know. I have no idea. However, I just feel like that put a bad taste in my mouth, I guess. So just, I think, to really think about these young kiddos and the impact that those extra minutes will have. And like Jen said, I think having a school district held to a higher standard of, they'll be fine, it's 5 or 10 extra minutes, but really, like, what is good for them? What is going to benefit them the most? Thank you.
Great, thanks. And I've got through my list. Last call. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight and for keeping your comments within our time frame so we can move through our meeting. I hope you appreciate that the board is listening. We had a communication from the public the first time this was on our agenda. Each of the each of the work group meetings had a communication from the public opportunity, and tonight we formed a work group to provide us with additional information related to this topic because it obviously has a lot of public interest, and we have a survey that's out there to try to gather additional information. We're going to be hearing tonight later on a report from the work group from Dr. Bergstrom. The board's not going to be acting on the start time issue tonight. We're going to get information tonight, have a chance to assimilate that over the next couple weeks, and then we will have that as an action item at our next board meeting. So we'll move on with our agenda. Information items, OEA report. Laura, do you have anything tonight? Okay. Student report. Hi, Cubby.
Hi.
You're up.
Well, actually, in light of the packed agenda as well as the pressing matters that will be addressed as well as have already been addressed tonight, I think I will hold off for tonight.
Okay, we'll give you a double time next meeting, okay?
Sounds good.
You better deliver, all right?
I will.
We want something special.
All right.
Okay, good. The heat is on. All right, action items. We've got 2 public hearings now. Are the Martins here? Hi. You guys can come up to the table here as we'll present up here, and I've got to call this order. We got a special procedure that we have to go through for this. So, okay, I'm going to call the public hearing to order on the petition for detachment and attachment to the Oregon School District to change the boundaries. I'm Steve Zock, president of the board, and I recommend that Gina Jonas serves as secretary for the hearing, and I'd need to entertain a motion to that effect under our protocol. I got Krista with the first and Tim with the second. Any discussion? Hearing on all those in favor of appointing Gina as secretary signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Gina, you're secretary. Okay, and then you'll, on the public hearing, minutes notice that all the board that are present here. Unless there's an objection from any board member, I'm not going to read the notice of hearing, or Gina won't read the hearing. Any objection to waiving the hearing? I did not think so. You have in front of you the statutory basis for us to consider tonight on the decision as to whether to modify the boundary. Those include the geographical and topographical characteristics of the district, including travel time to and from the public schools, the educational needs of all children residing in the districts, the programs currently offered by each district, and the ability and commitment of each district to meet those needs and to continue those programs. If a proposed territory is to be detached from one school district and attached to another, as this one is, whether the detachment will have any adverse effect on the program offered by the district from whom the territory is proposed to be detached, including both curricular and extracurricular aspects, the testimony and written statements filed by residents in the affected districts, the fiscal effect of the proposed organization on the districts, including the effect of apportionment of assets and liabilities, whether the reorganization would make any part of the district's territory non-contiguous, the socioeconomic level and racial composition of the pupils who reside in the territory to be detached and to whom the property is proposed to be attached, and the proportion of pupils who reside in such territory who are at risk as defined by statute, and the effect that will have on present and future socioeconomic levels and racial compositions. So those are the factors that we have to weigh. You guys have those in writing before you. I'm going to ask, the way this is going to proceed is I'm going to have first Brian give us an overview of the petition, okay? And then at that point in time, I'll have the Martins address us. And then if there are any opponents to the petition, they'll have an opportunity to address that. And then any closing information, and then Dr. Bussler is going to review the options for us and the criteria, and then we decide. Okay, so that's how we'll proceed. Dr. Bussler, could you walk us through the petition that's before us right now in public hearing number 1?
Yes. First, nice to meet you, Martins. I knew who the two of you would be because you would be the couple that I didn't know in the room. And when you sat down, I thought, aha, you are here. I hope, did you pick up the packet that we have?
We did not.
Katie, could you get them a copy of the packet? Board members, what you have in front of you are 2 reports, and you've seen these before. It's our purple report identifying the public hearing to alter school district boundary. There's supporting data that came along with the packets. The first packet, if you get to the center part of the data, I wish I had put the page number on it, but I did not. The property in question looks like this. And that is a 1-acre parcel. This last Friday afternoon, prior to these hearings, I always like to go and look at the property. I wasn't aware of where the property is. I took a drive, and I'll share later on in terms of the criteria. It's about 7 to 8 miles from Oregon, and it's about 6 miles to Belleville. Not that I personally traced it. I used Google Maps to identify that. There are 3 routes to get to the property from Oregon. So I picked the route that had the least amount of land. We've put together the supporting information. Again, later on I'll go through our review of the 7 criteria. You have all of the information in front of you, including a resolution authorizing the issuance of the appropriate order. You have the attachments, which include the petition, the map of the property location, the resolution, the Department of Public Instruction information, which includes information on the School District Boundary Appeal Board, the Public School District Reorganization process, and Chapter 117 of Wisconsin State Law on School District Reorganization. On the first parcel, also on the second parcel, we are recommending that the board hear the petition, adopt a resolution, and issue the order consistent with board action. The administrative recommendation is to approve the detachment from the Belleville School District and attachment to the Oregon School District. If approved, the clerk shall send a certified copy of the resolution to the Belleville School Board and to DPI within 5 days after adoption. So that's the general summary of report number 1 that we have, and according to state law, we can't mix them, so I would go through the same on report number 2, and when you're ready, I'm happy to walk through the 7 criteria.
Okay, I just have a real quick question on the colored map that we have, the one with the purple or whatever, this one? Before we,
okay,
that one? And I'm looking at that one. Okay, if I look at the other map, the Oregon School District borders that property at the very top. I just want to make sure. I'm going to ask the Martins. At the very top, so
That's where we live.
Yeah,
Okay.
we have a blown up map that would show that.
We have a better.
you got a better map. So we're going to have you guys, okay, so then why don't we wait till we go into your part of that? So, and that's right now. So the floor is yours, the proponents of the petition. Give your name, address, and school district so we have that for the record first.
Carl and Karen Martin at 5566 Bellbrook Road. We are in Oregon School District. We have 3 teenage boys. 2 go to the high school and 1 attends the middle school.
And you have a map for us to look at, right, Carl? Okay.
So the history is we purchased the land shown that you were just mentioning that's to the north about 12 years ago. Just before we bought that, there was a split. So it was a 20-acre parcel. The previous owner split it because they were thinking about building on the lower part that's closer to Bellbrook Road. They changed their minds, and subsequently over the years we purchased that. And as we looked at it, we realized that 20 acres was Oregon School District. But when when the split was made, where we are is still Oregon School District, and on that same shared driveway, the land that is also ours just below is Belleville. And so it's created a situation where we have a shared driveway that you can see on the map. There are 4 owners. There's the 3 in the back that are all Oregon School District, and now the 1 acre parcel and the 14 acre parcel are Belleville. And so one of the reasons we're petitioning is it doesn't make sense to us that you would have the same shared driveway, the same property that was Oregon, that now you have 2 districts. And so you know, feasibly, as population changes, you could have young families, 4 families in there, 3 go to Oregon, 1 goes to Belleville. You have school buses coming to the top of Bellbrook. I don't know how many of you have been out there. It's at the top of a hill. It's a challenge to get through. And so having 2 buses come from different districts to the same bus stop, I haven't heard of that happening, and it just seems like it creates some potential conflict there. So that's why we're petitioning to have it be included in Oregon as it originally was before the property was split.
Yeah, on the bus, Belleville bus would actually go down to Hillcrest, which is in the Oregon District, turn around and come back. At the same time, Oregon buses would be coming down Hillcrest and going up and turning around also on the top of that hill. So you end up having 2 buses, and those of you who haven't been out there, it's probably the steepest hill in the district. So you're right at the apex of a very steep hill on both sides. So that's a major concern. From that safety standpoint of having multiple buses, and it's blind, particularly if you go to the west when you're on top of that hill. It becomes very difficult turning around on that particular hill. So yes, as my wife stated, the parcelization was really strange. I'm not sure why, when that occurred in 2008, that didn't stay as part of the Oregon District. So the houses there where the students would go, they would actually go down the driveway and get picked up in the Belleville District. That driveway is part of what's in Belleville. That's a private road that serves those 4 residents that are back there. And as was stated earlier, on 3 sides, it's surrounded by the Oregon School District.
And with the visibility and the safety, as you can imagine, certainly not our teenage son, but there are teenagers that drive that road and adults that drive that road that really enjoy the long straightaway on both sides of the hill. And so we do have issues with people driving too fast. The speed limit was lowered to 45, and I think that helps for people that pay attention to it. There's also a bus turnaround sign, so I think the district and the community have tried to put more measures in place for safety. But it does still have challenges simply because of its topography.
Okay. Any questions of the Martins from anybody on the board? I just have one. So the rectangular parcel that's captioned "Divide and Decide" REV tier. That's the Oregon School District.
Yes, that's the
Okay, and then the Moses property up north above that, and then Labakan and Carlson are all Oregon School District, and then where the blue dot is your property there is that's Oregon School District there.
Yes.
That's correct.
Okay, and then that little parcel that we're looking at, the 1 acre, then that's where the Belleville School District starts.
Yeah, that's kind of strange even that's part of our lot. So there was actually a mistake, I think, when the county did this. So that's actually part of our lot where our house is, and I'm not sure why that became part of a different district.
Got it. Okay.
So that's not a separate lot, it's a separate tax parcel.
Yeah. Any other questions of the Martins? All right. Are there any opponents to the petition present tonight? Are there any opponents? Third time. All right. Is there any other information you'd like to share with us, or any questions that the board would have? Okay. If not, then I'm going to close the public presentation on the petition, and we're going to begin our deliberation process. We're going to process that only with the information that we have presented to us in the petition and before us. Dr. Bussler, could you walk us through the criteria that we're to assess in deciding whether or not to grant or deny the petition?
Yes, board members, there are 7 criteria that have been established by the Department of Public Instruction. And criteria number 1 is travel time between the residents and community. As I mentioned earlier, it's approximately 7 to 8 miles to Oregon and 6 miles to the city of Belleville. The second criteria is the educational needs of all children residing in the district. This particular petition is a 1-acre parcel, and it will not materially affect the instructional program at either school district. The Oregon School District is obviously a larger system and has a very comprehensive educational program. The third criteria is whether the proposed detachment will have any adverse effect on current programming offered by each district. Again, the impact of a 1-acre land parcel will have no adverse effect on programming in our district, and in my belief, the Belleville School District as well. The fourth criteria is in regards to the testimony filed by the residents. From a safety standpoint, it does make sense to make this change. I can't speak to the previous land splits and changes. However, I did have the opportunity on Friday to go out and visit the property. It is a picturesque area, and it is a very steep hill followed or in the center of 2 long straightaway areas, which I know some people like to speed in those sorts of areas. So from a safety standpoint, limiting the number of buses on that road would be a positive. The fifth criteria addresses the estimated financial effect on both districts. The current tax value of what I'll call Property 1, the first resolution, is approximately $6,000 with a property tax of $105 annually. Of course, when we think of the district's tax base, we're $2.6 billion with a B. It's hard to say that that property, even if developed, would have an adverse financial effect on either district. The sixth criteria addresses whether the proposed reorganization will make part of a school district's territory non-contiguous. And in a nutshell, the property in question is contiguous. Another word for that would be it's adjacent to the Oregon School District. So that, I've lost count how many school district boundary appeal meetings I've been at the Department of Public Instruction, but that is one of the most important factors so that the district does not create what's called an island. This would not create an island, accepting it. The seventh and final criteria addresses the socioeconomic level and the racial composition of pupils potentially residing on this property. The 1-acre parcel just doesn't apply in any way. That particular piece, I've had experience in other districts where a developer is attempting to bring in a 100-acre to maybe 500-acre developed site or site that will be developed that's going to have numerous home properties. That's something that could impact the detaching district or the attaching district from a socioeconomic standpoint or from a racial composition standpoint, but in this 1-acre parcel, that's simply not the case. So I'm happy to answer questions about any of those 7 criteria, provided you know I did not invent those 7 criteria. We are just following what is in state law.
Any questions of Dr. Bussler on the criteria or the administration's recommendation to grant the petition? Okay. And it is the administration's recommendation to grant the petition, Dr. Bussler?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So we have 2 suggestion motions in your packet, and then we're doing this by ballot, Gina, right? Okay. And so we would need a motion, either number 1 or number 2. Number 1 is to grant the transfer of the territory as described, or number 2 would be to deny. Troy?
I'll make a motion to grant the transfer of the territory described in the petition, that the reorganization requested in the petition filed January 30th, 2020 be granted, and ordered entered detaching the territory described in said petition from Belleville School District and attaching said territory to Oregon School District.
Is there a second to that motion? Okay, is there any discussion? Seeing none, would you pass out the ballots?
So, and just to be clear, if you write yes, that means you're supporting the motion, and if you write no, it would be you're not supporting the motion. So a yes is to attach to Oregon, and a no is to not. It's always one.
No, somebody else did it too.
There's two in every crowd. Okay. Motion passes 7-0.
Gina, do we need a separate motion to authorize the signature on the resolution authorizing this, given the motion?
Yes, we do, but it can
Okay.
be voiced.
Okay. Okay, so I need a motion to approve the adoption of a resolution granting the petition based upon the vote that occurred pursuant to the motion. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
I'll move adoption of resolution.
Second? Mr. LeBrun with a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That resolution is approved, and Krista, you can sign it as clerk. And with that, I will adjourn the first public hearing regarding altering the school district boundary. Give Katie a chance to catch up. Are you good? Let's go. I'll call to order a meeting of the school board of public hearing with respect to a petition to attach property in the Belleville School District to the Oregon School District and to alter the boundaries. I recommend that Gina Jonas serve as secretary. I need a motion to that effect. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Gina, you're secretary again. Please let the minutes of the public hearing indicate the board members that are present. Unless there's an objection, we'll waive the notice of hearing by the clerk. Seeing no objection, that's waived. I'm also not going to go through the statutory basis for the decision making because we've just been through that, or the overview, or do comments about how the process will take place because it will be the same as the last hearing, and I'll ask Dr. Bustler to introduce this, and then we'll bring up the petitioners, the Martins.
Board members, in your packet, whether it's electronic or in paper, this is agenda item D2, public hearing to alter school district boundary, Carl and Karen Martin, 5566 Bellbrook Road, Brooklyn, Wisconsin, 53521. Now, the supporting data is similar to the previous report that we prepared, except the one difference is this is a parcel that is 14.262 acres on Bellbrook Road. Oh, thank you, Andy. Andy has it highlighted for you in front of you. Again, we work through this process in accordance with Wisconsin state law. We've provided you with the attachments, which include the properly prepared petition, a map of the property location, a resolution for your consideration, information from the Department of Public Instruction, which includes the School District Boundary Appeal Board, the Public School District Reorganization, a detachment and attachment of small territory initiated by owner, and then Wisconsin State Statute Chapter 117 on School District Reorganization. Under our summary and recommendation, we recommend the Board of Education hear the petition, adopt a resolution, and issue the order consistent with board action on the resolution. The administrative recommendation is to approve the detachment from Belleville School District and attach to the Oregon School District. If approved, the clerk shall send a certified copy of the resolution to the Belleville School Board and to DPI within 5 days after adoption.
Okay, Martins, you're back up. And if you could state your name and address again for the record.
Carl and Karen Martin, 5566 Bellbrook Road.
Okay, and you're the proponents of the petition. Do you have anything to add for us? Why don't you just for the record? Yeah, just tell us what you're seeking.
Okay, we're seeking to have the property be placed in the Oregon School District. It originally was part of a 20-acre parcel, and that was Oregon School District. We own the northern piece of that. We bought this 14-acre piece and found that it was, when it was split, for some reason it was placed in Belleville instead of staying with Oregon. So we're asking to have it be part of the Oregon District. Our reasonings of safety, which Carl can address again, or also just that it is a shared driveway. It is contiguous property with the district. And it just would set a very strange situation where you have a private shared driveway with 3 homes being in Oregon and 1 being Belleville, just from the perspective of the kids living there, being in different districts, and having the two different districts sending buses to the exact same bus stop.
And the property that you're seeking to attach to the Oregon School District is boundaries the Oregon School District, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Are there any opponents to the petition? Okay, you guys can step down then, because I'm going to close the formal presentation. Board will consider the petition for this parcel. Dr. Bussler, would you review the criteria for this with the board?
Again, there are 7 criteria on this matter. The first criteria is travel time between the residents and the community, approximately 7 to 8 miles to the village of Oregon. It's 6 miles to the city of Belleville. The second criteria is the educational needs of all children residing in the districts. Again, a 14.8 acre parcel will not materially affect the instruction programming at either school district. The Oregon School District is a larger system and has a comprehensive educational program. The third criteria is whether the proposed attachment will have any adverse effect on current programming offered by each district. Again, we have a parcel that's 14.8 acres, and this one individual parcel will not have any adverse effect on programming. The fourth criteria is in regards to the testimony provided by the residents. Since this is adjacent to the first property that we talked about, it is also adjacent to the Oregon School District, and it makes sense from a safety standpoint to detach it. The fifth criteria addresses the estimated financial effect on both districts. The current tax value of property number 2, the one in front of you, is $35,000 with an annual property tax of $648. Again, Oregon's tax base is well over $2.6 billion, and I'm forgetting our property tax level. I'll look to Andy.
Total
yeah.
About $2.55 million, or $1 billion.
And the annual tax levy in this year's budget is probably about $24 million. So $648 and almost $25 million is, while it's significant if you're paying it, it's not significant in the total. The sixth criteria addresses whether the proposed reorganization will make part of the school district's territory non-contiguous. Again, the property in question is contiguous or adjacent to the Oregon School District, which is an important criteria that's reviewed by the School District Boundary Appeals Board. And then the seventh and final criteria addresses the socioeconomic level and racial composition of pupils potentially residing on this property. Again, a 14-acre property, even if it were split, and I'm not saying that it's going to be split or there's plans that it could be split, would have a very nominal impact. I can see the Martins are making eye contact with me, shaking their head that it's not going. Can't split it. Okay. One resident, one home on that 14-acre parcel is going to have no significant impact on either school district's socioeconomic level or racial composition. Again, that piece of criteria is really for a large development of 100 acres or say 500 acres where you're bringing a number of students into a particular school district. So that completes my quick overview of the 7 criteria. I'm happy to answer any questions board members have.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, then we have the same 2 motions on the potential motions on the table, so I need a motion from the floor. I was going to check to Troy to see if he wanted to do 2, and so he could go back and tell his colleagues. And yeah. Who's the second? There we go. Any discussion? Okay, if we could have the second ballot. Okay, and you'd write on here yes or no. Yes if you are in favor of the motion, which is to approve the petition. Okay, then I need a motion to adopt the resolution authorizing an issuance of an order pursuant to that vote. Is there a motion to that effect? Okay, Troy with the motion, Tim with the second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed. We're approved the resolution, and Krista, you're authorized to sign it on behalf of the board. At this time, then, I will adjourn the public hearing on this request for school district boundary alteration. Both of those were approved, and the appropriate orders or resolutions will issue. Thank you, Martins, for attending this evening. Okay. All right. That takes us into agenda item D3, appointment of representatives, board committees. Pursuant to our motion or action at the last meeting, the board decided to go back to having 2 committees, a policy and a visioning committee as authorized by our board policy. And the board's desire at that time was to resume them effective immediately because there's some work that needs to be done until the board's reorganizational meeting on April 20th. Policy committee obviously will have to work on the anti-harassment or the harassment hate speech policy. Generating and visioning, it's contemplated that visioning will work with Dr. Bergstrom and Dr. Bussler with respect to the leadership team meetings that are coming up, and then also to plan for the May board retreat. And we've got that date now set. So that would be the role of visioning committee. So I've talked with all of you, got some feedback, and so for policy, I'm appointing Krista as chair with Barb and Tim assisting her on that committee. And then for visioning, Troy would be the chair with Courtney and Anna serving on that. And that had nothing to do with where you guys are seated, but yeah, that is totally coincidence, okay? So Troy and Krista, you know, it's your job now to get your group together and get a publicly noticed meeting and work on the agendas. Keep me in the loop. I'll probably come to the meetings, I think. all board members are welcome to the other meetings because it'll be appropriately noticed for all board members to be in attendance. Okay, that dispenses with that. Going to D4, pool and athletic field study. Board, you'll remember that over the last year and a half, we have had some discussion and feedback relative to the pool usage and the the crowded nature of the schedule and the fact that folks aren't able to use the pool at times when they want to or at all. And Troy's talked about that, being involved with the swim club, and we've heard them and got information from them, and we've also got some preliminary information on utilization, but we needed more. And then we had also talked briefly with the board about our Donaldson property on the north edge of the village, on the other side of the cemetery, where it was proposed for a new junior high, and the possibility that we could have some athletic fields out there, given the discussion around the village of need for more recreational athletic space. And so Tim's been our representative on the park board. You guys have had some conversation, and asked him to bring us up to date a little bit on that conversation.
Yeah, there's actually been a lot of conversation at the park board as well as the village board with regards to our athletic facilities in general in the village, specifically to the village, obviously. As everybody knows, we're going through a redevelopment of J.C. Park West, and that has been under a group for quite some time, and a plan has been approved. The funding of that plan has been approved after $500,000 is raised by the village, either by village residents or by the athletic groups that take advantage of those fields. Once that $500,000 has been raised, the village is going to spend the money to finish the J.C. Park improvements, and it's somewhere north of $3.5 or $4 million to do that work. In our last meeting, there was a lot of conversation regarding some of the other parks that are being developed, particularly in response to a lot of, for lack of a better term, a lot of pressure from the athletic teams that use those parks. There's been discussions about the neighborhood parks, those parks that are really bounded by residential properties, as well as not only J.C. Park, but some of the other parks that frankly have some parking available and the space available for things like full-size soccer fields. There's been a lot of conversation, particularly as the J.C. Park improvement project has been approved. There's going to be a significant disruption to, for instance, the soccer field, the access to soccer fields. And so there's a lot of discussion on how we can accommodate the nearly 900 kids who play soccer in the rest of the parks around the village. A couple of parks that have come up most recently for new development have been discussions around the Alpine project, the Alpine property that the school district has identified as a future elementary school, as well as the Highlands of Netherwood development that is going up off of Netherwood currently. The Netherwood project has been has already been planned. It's already been approved to be funded, and for anybody who's been out in Netherwood, you'll see lots of homes going up out there, and so that park project is well underway. And there's essentially about a full-size soccer field that will go up as part of those improvements, as well as bathrooms, off-street parking, and things like that. As we've had those conversations, there's been a lot of interest in that Alpine property, and as those conversations have taken place, obviously the district has gone out and purchased about 107 acres, 106 or 107 acres, the Donaldson project, which is across the street from McDonald's all the way out to Highway 14. And so in our last meeting, I mentioned that in order to support the schools that will likely go up on that property, over the next 10 years, we're going to need athletic facilities. We're going to need facilities that will support those schools. We talked about the pool and the interest and need to go out and do a facility survey on just is there enough need to consider a pool in a future middle school, for instance. I mentioned that same action, that same analysis of athletic facilities, both how much of a need there is and where that need would best likely be met, also came up in that last park board meeting. And so I mentioned that before we go out and start planning from a village perspective, again, this is the village park committee, from a village perspective, it would behoove us to get together with the district to have a broader conversation around athletic facilities. All of us are well aware that those athletic facilities, those soccer fields, rugby fields, lacrosse fields, football fields, etc., are used by district-wide kids. Not just village kids, but district-wide kids. And as we know from a very in-depth analysis, we are going to see a significant increase in the number of kids who will be attending our schools and more than likely, very likely, using those athletic facilities. So I mentioned at the end of I recommended, before the park board recommend more park planning, that the village park board as well as the village board connect with the school board to talk about the broader need. Because without question, if it's a district-wide effort, it should be borne by a district-wide funding source. I think it makes very good sense to do it that way, rather than to plan one-off for parks just in the Village of Oregon. And so that was the recommendation we made. The village board is meeting tonight as well, and I've had a chance to talk with a number of village board members who would support that funding, that joint effort, that broader plan and analysis of what facilities are needed and where they should be placed in order to serve, from our perspective, the district-wide athletic needs, but also the village needs. And so now I sit here as a school board member, and I would recommend the exact same thing. I would recommend that we direct school administration to go out and connect with the village board to have that joint meeting to talk about funding a broader facilities analysis for athletics, not only for the pool, which we already know is overcrowded and we need the data to support that, but some of these other athletic facilities as well. Does anybody have any questions about what we've been talking about at the village park board level, which again floats up to the village board?
Courtney.
I don't have a question so much as a suggestion / comment that, to your point of it being a district-wide issue, wouldn't it behoove everyone to involve the City of Fitchburg Park Board and Brooklyn and all the other municipalities who might have
Yes.
interest, land, money,
Absolutely.
et cetera?
Yes, I didn't mean to just focus on the Village of Oregon, because it really is a district-wide, for us particularly, a district-wide focus. And so absolutely. And there's some great elements to be learned there. You know, the Village of Oregon is looking forward to a Parks and Rec director sometime in the near future. Fitchburg already has one. And to start gaining some of that insight from a municipality that already has some of the infrastructure in place from an administrative perspective, I think would be helpful as well. So yes, Fitchburg, Brooklyn, Village of Oregon, Town of Oregon, there should be, you don't want to get it too big that you can't get anything done, but the voices need to be heard without question.
To that point a little bit, is there any recognition from the Village of Oregon or knowledge, or was there discussion that the school district really has taken on gratis the role of managing not just our fields, but Village of Oregon fields. We've done the scheduling, we have the system, so that we are already kind of doing more than our fair share for the village in terms of helping to manage that is one question. Then two is, as we look to potentially hiring a consultant to look at fields, I would really love to see us expand that to also include how should they be managed, what are best practices for systems, and then do we also as a board need to start looking at our co-curricular athletic department budget that probably hasn't seen a change in a long time and how we manage that. So I think, there's one thing associated with the village and looking at the actual property and fields, but there's this other piece of you can't just build it and not worry about how you're going to manage it and how you're going to do it, and do we have the staff and how many kids are going to be participating. We've got a lot of data that almost half of our high school students and middle school students participate in some sort of co-curricular sport. And so we really need to look at that budget and the staff that we do too, because that's really what we say as part of the whole child experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Deb Bossingham has been part of those discussions along the way, particularly as it relates to the pool. But more recently, as it relates to, we've had lots of discussions around park fees. The parks get used heavily. And the municipalities around us, almost all of the municipalities around us have park fees associated with using fields or using facilities, bathrooms and shelters and things like that. And so they do recognize that the district is coordinating that today. But once we move a little bit further ahead, again, this whole issue around Parks and Recs director is going to be a ripe topic in the next 2 years. And if the village moves forward to start considering park fees more seriously, that's going to present a whole new level of not just checking out a park facility, but policing the fee collection and things like that. And so it really is a much bigger issue than just deciding what should we put at this park. So yes.
Any other questions? Okay, just to comment on the issue before us, and thanks, Tim, for summarizing where you've been with the park board, and then thanks for serving on that board for our school board. The best role of our school board is to be 5 to 10 years out and 30,000 feet up. And so we're not talking about we're building a pool or we're building these facilities. What we're saying is we know that there's pinch points in terms of usage. We've heard it from the folks who utilize the pool, that we're crowded there. And then we know that there are issues related to usage of athletic fields. We hear it from soccer with the reorganization of the village fields. We know that's an issue. We know that there's expanded use or expanded participation in lacrosse and rugby, and the demand for fields is going to be ongoing. We have some property where there's an opportunity to look at whether or not that property would be appropriate to address those. And so we're not saying we're going to go there, but I think what Tim's recommending is that we sit down and get data and study that before we make any decisions and plan and get some feedback on that and work with partners to do that, because it's a regional issue as opposed to a silo issue. Yeah. So if you guys are okay with that, I don't know that we need a formal motion, but we could just tell Dr. Bussler that one of the items on his plate, and Dr. Bergstrom, is to begin the processes of getting that sort of feasibility study and analysis done and getting partners involved in that. Krista?
And like I mentioned, I would just like to see it be expanded to not just property and feasibility and capacity, but if there's a company that also can look at systems as well as what is the school district of 4,500 students, what should a budget be? And so there are companies that do more expanded than just a feasibility study of property.
Any other comments or questions on this?
So
Barb?
is there going to be some kind of a charge developed for this committee that'll come to the board?
We didn't talk about putting together a committee. We're just talking about having the administration start the groundwork
Okay.
to retain somebody to do a feasibility study, both with respect to needs and properties and also with systems. I think that may be a little further out in this. This is just kind of at the beginning phase, recognizing that there are needs, recognizing that we have some opportunities as a district because of the property that we purchased to alleviate some of these needs, but we're not going to move forward to even consider that until we have some data. That's hard data to do it. Anna?
I know that we've had experience with co-funding studies, right, for transportation type things at our schools. Do you think that the intent is that we would be looking to co-fund this type of analysis with funds from the school district, but also funds from the village?
Yeah, that's exactly what we talked about. That's what we recommended to the village from the park board, is some kind of a relationship that it's not just a gathering of ideas and minds, but sharing in the cost. Mm-hmm.
Can I just say one thing? I would, again, emphasize, you've got other partners besides the Village of Oregon, so expand the thinking about that partnership.
Right, and Brian's had some conversation with the city of Fitchburg about the potential use, and whether that meets the criteria that they're looking at to include us in their long-range plan. And I think they said, yeah, for those sort of athletic facilities, that would be consistent with what they're looking at.
I just had that conversation last Friday afternoon with Patrick Marsh, and the conversation started about our comprehensive plan change, which I had reported to board members. We initially thought that would be approved in April, and after my conversation with Patrick, I've learned it is set and ready to go, and it should be approved by the council on March 10th. So we are 1 month ahead of schedule. And remember, we also had a conversation that on our shared use agreement between the city of Fitchburg and the Village of Oregon on the Donaldson property. And at a staff level, what we talked about was initiating that conversation once the comp plan was completed. So quickly after March 10th, we'll get that process rolling. I also talked to Patrick about the Donaldson property and reminded him of work that we had talked about earlier with respect to the pool and with respect to the athletic fields, and he was excited about that. And to the extent that we share together, it's a benefit for all. Remember, Forest Edge Elementary School has almost an 8, maybe 9 acre conservancy adjacent to the school, which is a tremendous asset for not only the city of Fitchburg, all of our school kids that will be attending, as well as our school district having that conservancy right next door. So it makes sense to plan smart and to look down the road into the future. And we will definitely include the Village of Brooklyn in the conversation. And my takeaway from this is we'll start with a staff sort of municipal conversation and explore the concept of doing a study collaboratively. Not sure what that means in terms of not everyone's going to pay the same cost, but it's a participation that would make sense. And I appreciate Krista's point about also looking at it from a system standpoint and sort of what I would call an infrastructure standpoint. Once we get this put together, how can we accommodate it today and years into the future?
It seemed like we had consensus. Go ahead for the administration to begin those conversations. Okay. Good. Thanks, Tim. All right. Discussion items. Agenda item E, school start end time work group report. And Dr. Bergstrom, I believe that's you.
It is, but I'd like to invite any of my fellow work group members to come on up. We have some chairs up here so that we can all be here and ready for any questions that you have for us. Just 1 second. I need the little flicker. All right, good evening, everybody. So we'll go through what we've brought for you this evening, and you'll notice that in addition to the report, the appendices, and the slide deck, you also have a binder. And the binder has all of the information that the work group members utilize to come to the recommendation. It's not going to, distance isn't enough, sorry, or it's too much. So the next slide, please. Yeah, go ahead and drive. Thank you. So here you see we had a really terrific work group. We met 4 times for approximately 2 hours, sometimes a little bit over that each time. There was a time set aside at the beginning of each meeting for public comment. And while public comment wasn't utilized, it was very nice to have parents who were there observing at every one of the meetings. I would say the work group brought all very unique perspectives. And one thing I think is really important is that with just a couple of exceptions, everybody on the list either has or had children who went through the Oregon School District. So they not only brought the perspective of perhaps current parent and staff, but perhaps they have the perspective of children who just recently graduated. So we had a lot of background experience with the Oregon School District as part of this group. I also want to say many thanks to Amy Miller, because I know she's probably watching tonight. She not only organized, but at many times she was the childcare for the meetings. And because of that, people were able to attend, and I want to thank her very much for that. It was very helpful to the parents who utilized it. So then, with the next one, we'll start with what we started with every time we met, because basically in this district, this is what we start almost every meeting that we have. We use these words and this graphic because we talk about the fact that the mission is why we're here, and the values are what drive us in service of our mission. And so this endeavor, just as any other, had to be in alignment with that. We also spoke about the fact that when we're working together collaboratively to come to a decision that had many different points of view, it was really important to use collaborative norms. So we emphasized at the start of each meeting the Adaptive Schools 7 Norms of Collaboration, because how one works with others is just as important sometimes as the what we're trying to decide. The next one was a way for all of us to remind ourselves every time we started, because once again, this was a part of every meeting, that all of these different components that are in service of our kids, but they're all interrelated. You can't make a change in one without impacting others. And so the interrelated components were something that we reminded ourselves of every time. So now we'll go on to meeting 1, and I'll walk you through the process a little bit, not so much all of the information that was discussed. Because you'll notice that in your report, Appendix A is the list of the people who are on the work group. Appendix B is a rather lengthy list of all of the information that you will find in your binder, because it's all of the things that we used as a group to create a common foundational set of knowledge. There are things that we needed to know in order to be able to do this work and do it well. So you see it's quite long, and that's what you have in the binder in front of you. So for meeting 1, we spent considerable time examining the board charge and establishing rule clarity. What was it that was within our decision-making parameters? What was the expected outcome for the board? We spent a lot of meeting 1 establishing common knowledge. We went through the December 16th board presentation. All of this is outlined in your paper to a much greater degree. The slide deck from that particular presentation, the American Academy of Pediatrics policy statement, the University of Kentucky study, and there are many things that were built off of those things, and you'll see that on your list too, because we added more information as the meetings went on. This is just the first one. We also then went on to populate a list of questions or requests for information. that the group thought was really important to consider before we moved forward. So at the end of meeting 1, we had a lengthy list. The list was about as long as your Appendix B. So we had quite a few things that people were interested in seeing, and we went back as an administrative team and divided it all out to make sure that we could supply that by the meeting in the next week. So that's when we get to meeting 2. After meeting 2, I'll stop and see if any of my work group members want to add to anything at this point. But for meeting 2, we had Mike Carr discuss all of the co-curricular information that was really important to us to have an understanding of how students were impacted with their after-school co-curricular activities. Gina did an example of how DPI minutes are calculated, and that was because there was really an interest in understanding, not because there was any fear that we weren't meeting the minimum requirements or anything of that nature. Gina created a very lengthy set of data related to comparing aspects of our start and end times to other districts. So you see it's in the very back of your binder, I believe, but it's average daily minutes, average weekly minutes, early release times, daily teacher contract, yearly teacher contract, in addition to start and end, to have a really good understanding of where we fit in with all of our neighboring school districts around the county. We also saw some information presented on transportation. And initially, the first slide, and you'll see that in your week 2 slide deck, the first transportation slide was pretty easy to understand because it was the average number of riders, not the number that's reported to DPI where someone only has to ride once, but it was the actual number of students that the bus drivers see on a regular basis. So that ended up being approximately 55% of our students ride the bus on a regular basis. 2,295 kids out of 4,140. And another interesting piece that we discussed was, of that number, 764 students at RCI, OMS, and the high school are dropped off before 7:30. Because a good number of our buses, 12 out of 19, currently utilize double runs. So they have to pick up the older kids, drop them off quite early, and go back out to get the younger kids. So we knew that there were a lot of students who were waiting around before school for quite a bit of time. We also saw information on after-school programs, which after-school programs were available in our area, how many students were currently attending each, and we also know that there are some pretty lengthy wait lists out there for after-school care, and that ended up being about 412 students who had after-school care that we know about, and we might learn more in the survey that we'll get to in a moment. We also gave the work group a summary of any emails that came in after December 16th, any parent or staff emails, and the themes, the feedback themes that came from that. So that got us through meeting 2. And I will just stop for a moment and see if any of my fellow work group members wanted to add a comment on anything from meetings 1 and 2. Okay, here we go. All right, then we'll move into meeting 3. In meeting 3, we went over another update from Mr. Carr because there were a few questions and clarifications that were needed regarding the number of students impacted. And as previously mentioned tonight, we have over 50% of our students who are involved in an athletic activity after school. We answered additional questions because honestly, the transportation information is a lot to absorb at one time. And then we went into the evaluation of current options. So on December 16th, 8 options were presented to the board, 8 possibilities, and we put all of those possibilities, and you see a picture of it in the slide deck. We blew up each possibility to be a little more legible, 11 by 17, and put it on one of the large pieces of wall-sized poster paper. Created a circle so that all of the work group members were in pairs, moving from one option to another on a 2 to 3 minute increment. So they had someone to talk to where they either added to pros and cons, asked further questions, made points of clarification, underlined exclamation points, whatever they felt was necessary to help them process that particular option and what they saw as positive or not so positive related to it. After we went through that, we took a picture of each of those sheets, and you see an example on the meeting 3 slide, excuse me. Then we added all those pictures back into the slide deck, and as a large group, went over them one by one. What did people say? What did people think? What do people need further clarification on? At the end of meeting 3, we were through approximately half of those options. So now comes meeting 4. This is where the rubber's hitting the road, because we have a lot of information. We've begun to evaluate options. We still have to take a look at the posters that we made on the other half of our options. And then after that, we did something a little different. We knew it was important to, based on the board charge, we were to have 2 to 3, or I believe it was either 2 to 3 or 1 to 3 potential recommendations, one of which had to have no cost above the original working plan. So knowing that, whether we had 3 recommendations, 2 recommendations, at least one of those had to be at no cost above the working plan. Consequently, we divided all options into additional cost, no additional cost above the plan. So we were going to re-examine all of the no additional cost options. But before we did, we wanted to take a look at what was starting to become really important to people and what were things that perhaps were important but they were willing to compromise. So you see on this slide in front of you, this is just one example. We had several of these: K4 start of day, K4 length of day, 7-12 number of instructional minutes, 7-12 ending before 4 o'clock. There were all kinds of things that were on there. So we asked everyone to take one dot and place themselves on a continuum related to this particular topic. Was this something that, as we were making our decision, was not as important to you, was important but you were willing to compromise on this issue, or you thought this issue was absolutely critical? Just so that we could get a sense of where some people might be before we started re-examining options. And it was very interesting, because we saw that the K4 start of day, which is in front of you now, was pretty much the exact mirrored reflection of K4 length of day. More people were on the opposite end of the spectrum for length of day, between critical and important but willing to compromise, as opposed to start of day was between mostly. Clearly, we were not unanimous on any of our feelings, which would be expected in a group of 18 individuals. Start of day was more on the side important to not as important in the scheme of things. So we were just trying to get a better understanding of what were people's really important items before we began to evaluate our options. So another example of this would be the next one, the 7-12 length of day. So you can see the 7-12 length of day really had most people clustered on the this is really important side of the continuum. So what did we take away from that before we started reevaluating options? We took away the fact that the majority of the group felt that 7-12 should end before 4. The majority of the group felt that 7-12 should not lose additional time, because remember, the original working plan and the 45-minute differential required the high school to lose 15 minutes and the middle school to lose 5. In general, the work group was more willing to compromise on start time than length of day. Remember, this is all generalities. There's nothing unanimous here. And the majority of the work group saw value in the instructional minutes for grade 5 and 6, but people understood that as we move forward and things change, that was going to be a big point of compromise. So Then people went over and started looking at all of the options that were on the table again, divided up into the no cost above the original working plan. And people started to write down a lot of things. Ideas were being generated. And so we not only had the original group of options, but we had, we're starting to fill up a couple of different sheets on other ways that we could think about this. And eventually, we came back to the other side of the room, away from the papers, and started putting down more ideas. An example of one of those, one of the ideas that were put down for consideration is in your, on your slide deck, where it has 7:50 to 2:45 for K6 and 8:35 to 8:50 for 712. And that would be a 6-hour and 55-minute day for elementary and a 7-hour and 15-minute day for 712. So we discussed these options at length, but we also saw that we were tinkering with 5 minutes here or there. At that point, it was then suggested that perhaps we give the board parameters, and then after they were able to see the survey, they could use the parameters that we were offering in addition to the survey to do some of that tinkering. So that's when we took a look at some of the things that we knew we really needed to land on. We had already said as a group that we felt comfortable with 7 hours and 15 minutes for secondary, and that we felt comfortable with secondary ending before 4. We also really took out any option that had K6 starting at 7:45. So then we took a look at 6 hours and 50 minutes for K6, which is the current time, 6 hours and 55, or 7 hours. And when we asked people what their preference was for that, it was very clear that the committee did not want the K6 day to go over 7 hours. That is a parameter for us, not over 7 hours. And I believe it was 12 out of the 17 said they felt most comfortable with the 7 hours, but we had 3 people at the 6:55 and 2 at the 6:50. We did the same thing for K6 length of day. So at that point, we had either 7:50, or excuse me, start time, K6 start time, either 7:50 or 7:55, which then ends up with a high school end time of either 3:50 or 3:55. You'll probably notice that at this point, we had already made the decision that our answers were within the 45-minute differential, not in the options that had a cost above the original working plan. So we stopped looking at that and put all of our energy into looking at what could work with the 45-minute differential. I'll open this up to my group members in just a moment. So where does that lead us? That led us to some parameters that we would recommend to you to use in conjunction with the parent and staff survey that was sent out last week and will close this coming Sunday. We recommend that our solution utilizes the 45-minute start and end time differential. The grades 7 to 12 end before 4 o'clock. The grades 7 to 12 have a length of day no shorter than 7 hours and 15 minutes. And when we looked at K6 length of day, we all agreed it should not be over 7 hours. When I say we, I'm the facilitator. I didn't put a dot on anything, okay? So we does not include me in this particular situation. Everyone was in agreement, no more than 7 hours. The majority of the group selected 7 hours, but there was disagreement on that. There were people who thought 6:50 or 6:55 was more appropriate. And then the K6 start time, the majority selected 7:50, and I believe there were a couple of members who felt strongly about 7:55. And one of the 7:55 options is in your slide deck and one of the pictures I just showed you 2 slides ago. Now, that's a lot. So I will then see if any of my work group colleagues would like to mention anything. Otherwise, we'll open it up to questions from you.
Any questions from the board? I mean, the plan is that we've got a lot of stuff here to review, plus we're also going to be getting the survey results, and this will be for our March 9th meeting.
Correct.
So, you know, we've got to read and assimilate this, and also the survey results as well. But any immediate questions?
So for the elementary school day of 7 hours, that includes, or was there discussion of a longer lunch or recess and keeping instructional time the same?
Correct. That's one of the assumptions that we made throughout the entire process, is that any additional elementary time would be for lunch and recess only.
We did have some people speak to it too, so the recommendation of the 7:15 for 7 through 12, what is the impact on the lunch hour?
15-minute reduction. It goes from 45 to 30.
For OMS and high school, and what are...
Actually, that's just for high school. For OMS, it's a reduction in 5 minutes overall, so they're just going to have to work that out in their general schedule.
Okay, so what is the current time? So high school currently has a 45-minute lunch, and what does OMS currently have? Yeah. 36. Okay.
There was no discussion, though, on where the 5 minutes would come from the OMS schedule. That would be up to that group.
This just might be a detail you couldn't get into, but one of the people, the student who testified tonight, mentioned the length of lines to get lunch. And as enrollment increases, I imagine that could get worse, although perhaps the school lunch configuration would be adjusted to prevent longer times.
We are thinking about that, and Andy can speak to it.
So we actually only utilize 2 people, I believe, at registers, maybe 3. We have 4 registers now, and we have the ability to add a 5th line if we need to. So we get kids through the lines pretty darn quick now with a new configuration.
Do we have any analysis in here in terms of bus ride times for kids and what the impact of these schedules would be? Because I know that that's been something that's very important to me, because that's one of the reasons we've started some of these conversations, but that's also an educational impact for me.
So bus rides, we feel strongly that we'll be able to impact 712 fairly significantly into the positive. I think the majority of the impact K6 will actually be for the longer rides on the north side of the district, because we're going to be transporting right to Forest Edge. I don't see things significantly changing on the west side of the district, K6, or necessarily on the south side. And that's just because of the geography in the area that we have to cover. But for the 712 routes, I think we'll be able to significantly improve those. It will be a little bit of a budget impact and at what point in time we want to kind of stop, because we'll have a lot of extra buses that aren't running second runs that we'll be able to add second runs if we want to improve those times. The K6 routes are going to have to be, the majority of those buses are going to have to be utilized for that run just because of capacity issues. Because now we're taking the 5th and 6th graders and moving them to the K4 runs. So I'm not as strongly, I can't strongly tell you that we're going to improve those times much more than probably in the north side of the school district.
So Andy, along with the recommended start times and the bus, I don't know if you've looked at initial bus routes, probably at least at a high level.
Very high level, considering that we don't know who's going to what schools yet.
Sure. Do you have a sense of how early a student at the earliest would get on the bus, And
Yeah,
at the
that's
latest,
that's
how they would
actually-
get off?
That's actually in the packets.
Okay.
And there's earliest. They don't change much, to be honest with you. They change to reflect the earlier start times.
Yes.
The averages improve significantly because we are taking some of those outliers and improving them. But that is in your document.
Okay.
You'll find all
It's a
of
very
the,
busy chart.
the transportation information is in the slide deck for work session 2 and 3. You'll find it in both places.
Great, thank you.
One more question. Am I correct in saying that with a 45-minute time between buses, built into that is that we are eliminating these long periods when the kids are at school before school starts? So that's-
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Big concerns that we had from, I'm forgetting the name of the
The Raven Oaks
Raven
subdivision.
Oaks, is
Yeah.
that it solves that problem.
Correct.
Okay. Just jump in,
Yeah.
folks.
Am I understanding this report correct to mean that you are recommending parameters but no real options to us?
Do you mean that whether it's 5 minutes here or 5 minutes there, we thought we'd wait and allow the board to make the decision based on using their survey information also? But within the third page of the report, if you went with 7 hours, for example, because that was the one that the majority of people connected with, and you started at 7:50, it could be a 7:50 to 2:50 for the younger kids and an 8:35 to 3:50 for the older kids. So there are options embedded within the choices that the majority signified. But I think it's really important to note that the group didn't come to a consensus on the best length of day or the start of day for K-6.
Sorry, I just have a clarifying point on lunch. I just chatted with Jason. The 36 minutes actually includes passing times. So if you were to do like for like, the high school should have about 35 minutes. I believe they took the 5 minutes out. So it's very within a minute of time.
Any other questions? Okay, so we've got a lot to do. What I would ask the board members to do is look at this over the next week, okay? I mean, this week. And if you have questions, go ahead.
When do we get the survey information?
It closes on Sunday, and then we'll be able to get the information to you within a couple of days after that, correct? Mm-hmm.
Okay. But with the information that you have, go through that, and it would be more efficient if you had questions about that you shoot them to me, okay? And then I will collect those, by next Sunday, and then I can get with Brian and Leslie and work on getting responses out to all board members with all the questions. Okay? How's that work? Homework assignment? Okay. Good. Anything else, Leslie, or members of the committee?
No, I'll defer to my work group members. Anybody else wants to add
Troy?
something?
Yeah, I just would add, Anna and I served on the committee, and just a big thank you to everyone who gave up a lot of time. It was a lengthy process, and we all learned a lot. It certainly gave me a lot more clarity to all of the things that have to be considered with this. And I think the parameters that we came to were fairly unanimous on the committee. I think what struck me is that the committee clearly valued education over busing, and when we looked at some of those cost options, it seemed, at least my read, was that those were not very favorable because they favored busing costs over education costs and classroom costs, and that's where the committee wanted to put the money. And so that struck out to me. I guess I was pleased to see that. And the dual bus routes, that's really, in my opinion, that's a long-term position for the district, that we can maximize our capacity as we can maximize our dual bus routes. And it was also discussed that there's a bus driver shortage out there right now. That certainly could change with the economy, but right now it's challenging to find bus drivers, and going to a dual bus, more of a dual bus route scenario than what we have today allows bus drivers to make that more of a job, and requires us to hire less bus drivers. So those are kind of the big takeaways from me. So again, a big thank you to the group.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this pretty much continuously since for the last month, 4 weeks. And one idea that I wanted to pose to the group as a potential consideration with looking at the length of day for the elementary age kids. At the WASB conference, I was speaking with a school board member who is in Janesville, and I was explaining kind of this situation that we're in here in Oregon, talking about changing our start times, changing our length of day. And one of the things that he suggested to me, and I took the information and kind of filed it away and didn't think about it again, but I think it's something worth talking about or looking at. And what he suggested is that one thing they've implemented in Janesville is they're offering breakfast to every student every day of the week. And potentially, could we look at using that additional 10 minutes or whatever time we're talking about, adding to the length of day for K through 6, if that's what comes of this, and look at that as an option of offering breakfast to all of the students. What he mentioned to me is there are grant opportunities out there that you can find ways to fund that, so it does not have as much of a fiscal impact on our budget, but it could be something worthwhile to look at, and something that may kind of ease some of the concerns about how much more time they'd need in the morning. If we're offering breakfast at school, then that's 10 minutes that's being used. That's less 10 minutes that they would need to have at home, maybe for breakfast at home. So I throw it out there as a suggestion to think about. I don't know what the implementation would be for that, or what the whether that's an opportunity to look at, but I throw it out there as an idea for us to be thinking about.
Thanks. We did talk about that in the broader scheme of when we were looking at transportation models. We were looking at like a hub system and bringing everybody to one location where we might have central breakfast. That was sort of an offshoot of that. And so I think that's something to store away depending on where we land as a board in terms of the start and end time thing, that might be something looking at long term. Okay. Tim.
Just one last thing, because I know it continues to come up, and I just want to clarify this issue around transportation, because I heard it even tonight that an issue came up around the fact that we didn't plan for transportation, and it's important to understand that as our school district grows, it comes with funding on a per student basis. And that per funding that it comes with includes an element for transportation. So as we put 100 more kids into our schools, it comes with transportation dollars for 100 more kids. There's a myth out there that the referendum did not include $500,000 or whatever the number is for more transportation. A referendum is a capital question. It's about building things or putting in place equipment or facilities to serve a larger district. And the operating of that district comes on a per student basis. And so there is not an issue around we forgot to plan for transportation here. It is really important to understand that a referendum is a capital question and operating is on a per student basis. And so there is money for 100 more kids in transportation as we put 100 more kids into our schools. It's a very important element, and I hope that I don't hear from somebody who has heard this conversation that we didn't plan for transportation. It's not the fact. Okay? Any questions about that?
Thanks, Tim. Okay, board, you got your homework assignment stuff to me by Sunday if you have questions, and then be prepared then on March 9th to walk through this and hopefully come to a resolution one way or the other. And thank you to the work group for all the time that you spent putting this together. I mean, the goal was to get the board a unified group of facts and data for us to consider that everybody was on board with. We have that. And we had 8 options that were before us, which is a little unwieldy for us as a board to sift through. We now have some parameters. You know, we didn't expect that there would be consensus amongst a diverse group of folks. I mean, the ultimate decision is going to come with us to make that decision, but we needed to narrow it down a little bit, and we've got that narrowed down now. Okay, so that we can start making some decisions. So you guys did exactly what we needed to as a board, and so the rest is going to be on our shoulders to make that decision. Okay, let's move on to our next agenda item. And that would be, Andy, you're on with the 5-year plan, budget plan. And this is the start of our work on building our budget for the 2021 school year, okay, which we're already in, sort of.
Yeah, but the first year we've got covered, right?
Yeah.
First
so,
part of it.
This is the beginning of the process, because then coming on the heels of this will be a staffing report and prioritization. So before we do that, we need to know kind of what the economics look like for that decision-making process. So Andy, go ahead.
You bet. So every year I do this little report. I talk a little bit about it's you have to be careful about doing these projections so many years out, because the more years out that you go, obviously those assumptions you're judging compound themselves. So I never really take, and I think it's a good thing to kind of project out to the future a little bit, but I always like the first, or I put the most weight on the first year of the projection, because as we go out further, things can change so drastically. This report, to be honest with you, was interesting because we ended up wanting to just basically show you the impact of growth rather than saying for sure these numbers are going to be accurate. Because we're going into such a significant growth curve, I think I wanted to basically just kind of show you a number and what that number would do over time as far as revenue to the district, rather than trying to hit the number on the head, because it has so many variables connected to it, whether a recession's coming, whether the growth is happening like Mr. Roffer's projected. How fast that growth happens is really a component to that. So that said, I thought we would get into this, and now do I need the clicker, which is right next to me here? There we go. So the first thing we did was we wanted to look a little bit at Mr. Roffer's projections and where we are, and also kind of think a little bit about referendum planning and the growth that has happened or was projected to happen when we went to referendum. So I want you to kind of focus on the total line. Don't necessarily worry about the 4K EC lines and the total FTE. Those are numbers that tie into other numbers down the road, but let's just focus on the total line there. You can see the January 2017 actual membership was 3523. Now keep in mind, I'm going to give a little bit of business manager education here, so apologize for that. But there are lots of numbers that I deal with. These numbers are called membership numbers. This does not have necessarily a huge correlation to the number of kids we educate, because we educate open enrolled students and those types of things, as well as membership. Membership relates directly to residents that live in our school district. They don't necessarily even have to go to school in our district. In fact, there's around 80 or 90 students that go to other districts that are in these membership numbers. So these are merely residents that live within the Oregon School District proper, okay? So I want to make that clear for folks if we start getting confused with numbers. So back in January 2017, when we were kind of starting the Roffers report or in the Roffers projection mode, we were at that number. Third Friday, the following year, we were up a little bit, about 120-ish, 130 students to 3652. And then this last September, we were up about 18 students. So growth has slowed a little bit. Partially perhaps because the large development, Terra Vesta, hadn't quite come online yet. It is starting to come online now. The projection for the start of this next school year, Mr. Roffers didn't project every year, but he grabbed a couple year kind of midpoints, would have been 4,443 residents. So you can see that for us to get there is quite the climb. That we're probably not going to make it in this next 6 months to get to that number. We were up, good news is, from Third Friday in September this last year, in 2019, we were up about 20 students, I believe. So our numbers are around 3690. I'm looking at Katie if she's...
That's the January?
Yeah, it's of January. So we've had some growth in between Third Friday, but we anticipate significantly more growth in the next 6 months as houses are coming online and those types of things. So just kind of give you a feel, I'll take a little break and see if anybody has any questions about that. Okay. In the report that I provided, I did talk about, and that's not in the PowerPoint here, I did talk about that we had anticipated around 420, was it 420? Yeah, around 420 student growth in the referendum projection. That obviously has not happened. We are hoping that another 150 students come online, so we would be closer to, I'm doing quick math here, about 300 student increase in those couple of years. But because we're a little bit lower in our projection, we are, the amount of money that we thought we would have available this next year is a little bit tighter than what we had hoped. I do have some good news for that in a moment, though. So, and here's that moment. Yeah, exactly. Here's the revenue side. Now, keep in mind, this is not super detailed budget. Okay, this is still kind of, we're not at 30,000 feet. We brought the plane down a little bit. We're probably at 15,000 feet. We did take a little harder look at some costs that maybe typically we hadn't been looking at this point in time, because we know as we go through this process that these numbers start to become targets for us. So, and we want to have that target because of the staffing, and we want to be able to go out and be able to attract the best staff members for our district. So we have to get out to the market a little earlier than Andy would like, because Andy likes the numbers to be a little bit more known. But we do this in anticipation and to get to that goal. So you have some numbers there. You can see that our 3-year average, we are anticipating 150 new students. And I'm not sure I talk about that in the PowerPoint, but I do definitely in the agenda item where I talk about averaging. So in our membership counts, it's a 3-year average. So the first year you get if it's 150 growth, you get 50, then you get 100 the second year, and then you're at 150, you get the full growth after 3 years. That works both ways in the state of Wisconsin. So those districts, and keep in mind there's like 70% of the districts that are losing students, so they lose a little bit slower. The districts that are gain a little bit slower than they would normally like. So that's the impact of that. That's why that 3-year average happens. And then we anticipated basically the state law through the budgeting process, the state budget process, what the impact of that was. And you can see the $175 that we have authorized. It's actually $179. A little typo there, and then an extra little bit of money for transfer service. That's related to anticipated transfer service. The transfer service is related to special needs students that leave a district and come to our district, and then we have to increase staffing or costs because of that. We are allowed an exemption in the revenue cap. So the gist of that is we're projecting about a little over $900,000 related to that. Per pupil increase, because we think there's going to be 150 more kids, that translates into $55,000. Special education, this is a big one that you heard about in the state budget, and that's bringing our number from 25 or 26% to 30. We did back that down a little bit to 29.5, simply because we don't always spend all the special education money, so we hedge a little bit closer to 29.5 just to make sure that we get everything that we're planning to get. And then we get into the open enrollment increase, not very large. We did kind of cap our open enrollments this year a little bit, but you see there was an increase actually in the dollar amounts for open enrollment. So if our numbers stay even fairly similar to where they are right now, we'll benefit from that. And then we have the referendum override that was included within the second question for the district at $1.7 million. So that gives us a total of $3.6 million. So a larger budget than, quite honestly, I've had in my 21 years here in the district. But we do have some additional costs associated with the new school.
Can I just jump in for a second, Andy?
You bet.
On the override one, our question was 1.7, but we were also projecting for the actual costs of operating the new school using 420 students. Is that like making that like a $2.9 million cost?
If you included those, yeah, I guess you could look at it that way.
Yeah.
When we did the sheet that calculated that $1.7 million, we actually anticipated we'd have $1.2 million extra dollars.
Right, and that was based on 420.
Correct.
Okay, since we're going to come up short of 420, we're going to be somewhat short of the 1.2. Okay.
Correct.
But that's still, even though we're short, we're still getting total new revenue of 3.6.
Correct.
Had we been up, that number would have been larger.
Correct.
Okay,
Absolutely.
So just wanted people to understand that just because Terra Vista hasn't built out as quickly, we're still getting new revenue. Yeah.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. Absolutely.
Okay.
So then we've got the costs there that we've identified so far. The education compensation plan, that's the movement within the schedule. The 1.8% is basically that percentage increase for everyone within the staff. Benefits associated to those salary increases, so we're talking Social Security and Medicare, and then WRS. Health insurance, here's the good news. Gina and I, Gina wants to give me credit, I'm going to give her partial credit too. We were able to negotiate that 4%, which was our cap in health insurance, to 2%. So you can basically take that $220,000 and cut it in half. We have about $110,000 more than we anticipated. That happened Friday afternoon, so hence the item wasn't quite updated yet to reflect that. So there is some good news. We're closer to $400,000 in available unallocated funds. Workers' compensation, an increase there to compensate for basically the additional staffing that we're going to have. Property insurance, we had some bad experience a few years ago. And that is kind of coming to impact us, as well as the market for property insurance is not great. We're seeing increases throughout the state. And then we also have the addition of a new school, which is going to impact property insurance. So we are budgeting a little bit over $30,000 increase there.
Andy, do we shop that around?
Our broker, M3 Insurance, does for us. I will tell you that based on what I have heard, there are not a significant amount of, there are not a lot of property insurers in the market.
Okay.
We used to have what's called a local property government insurance fund. That almost went belly up, and their rates had to go up significantly because they, It was a cooperative. They gave some dividends to people, and then right when they did that, they had like 2 or 3 catastrophic claims that kind of emptied the fund. So it was just bad timing. We had moved away from them actually a couple years before that, and have been with our current carrier for some time now, EMC. Extra transportation routes. These are extra. So we talked a little bit about this in our last presentation, that we have a lot of singular runs, not a lot, but about half. And so we could take those runs. Some of them are only first runs, first day run, or how do I say this? Early runs, and some of them are only late runs. And so we have the ability to add secondary runs to both of those. Those are fairly cheap to make, to increase. For the first runs, if we proceed with the direction that was recommended, we will probably have to increase a lot of those buses to secondary runs that were the second run. They're going to have to make those first runs to deal with the capacity issues. The secondary, the afternoon runs, or I'm sorry, the second runs in the morning and the afternoon, we're going to have less students on those, so we might be able to add a couple to improve service levels, as I was talking about a few minutes ago, but it's really limited how far you can go with that. Regardless, there are some costs there. We are planning for them at $8,000 per bus, so that's $64,000 we're including within our budget.
And then just to jump in, I mean, this emphasizes Tim's point that he made earlier about the false information out there that part of the start time conversation was because there wasn't budgeting for buses. As a matter of fact, it's reflected in here that we're working on an annual operating budget for those, which was a consideration when we developed the override question for the annual budget.
Yep.
Okay.
So then I didn't include, I probably should have, included the spreadsheet that we looked at last year when we set the override question. But basically, if you take out the classroom teachers, if we added 10 classroom teachers, it would be higher than this, but basically $2.178 million associated with new costs with opening the school. So that's anything from a librarian, to a principal, to administrative intern, to custodians, to cleaning service, to utilities, a number of positions that help students, special education teachers, special education para-educators, all those kind of add up into that number. So that's there as well, and we're trying to manage to that number as we hire new folks. That, to be honest, is the gist of kind of where a lot of our time has gone in looking for things as we get ready to get into the staffing component. But looking out for a couple years, I wanted to give you a little bit more information here. This is the impact of the 3-year average that I talked before, and you can see that it takes a little while for that average to kind of have an impact in the third column, the difference in the 3-year average. You see that it goes from 51, the ones are rounding, to 100, to 150, to 200. It just takes a while for that to work through the impact. What we're basically assuming here is 150 students per year. And then we also did the average with 100 students just to kind of show you the impact there and the difference that would happen. So what kind of money does this mean is obviously a question that people might ask. And all we did here, the only difference obviously is the increase in students. We didn't even, quite honestly, because it's just more of an exercise, we didn't really even look at roll-ups. All we did was increase the FTE by 150 students. So we can kind of get a feel for that impact. The first year obviously is the number we just talked about, the $3.6 million. 21-22, so a year out from this next year, and you're looking at close to $2 million. And then even though it's still 150 students, you can kind of see it stabilizes after that because you're the third year and you've started to get those 3 years in, and you're at $2.6 million increase, and it goes up to $2.7 million increase that third year. So it's starting to roll through, and you have a little bit more flexibility as it goes down through the process. And that again makes Tim's point that as we get new students, it has an impact and we get additional revenue because of it. Just as a way of comparison, if nothing else, if we had 100 students, because then you could kind of multiply that number by however many hundreds of students you think you're going to get. Here's the difference of that. So this is just a quick way for us to demonstrate the difference between 100 and 150 students. And I think that was the end of my presentation, but I'm happy to ask additional questions or answer additional questions if you have any.
That side of the table, anybody have any questions? Okay, over here.
Again, I know this is just preliminary, Andy, but the savings you negotiated in the increase, that flows all the way down to the unallocated.
Correct.
We can add another 110,000.
Yep. So instead of 281, we're probably closer to 400,000.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
And we're working on right now with the opening of the new school, basically on a staff neutral in terms of adding staff, or are we going to? I'm looking at Leslie and Andy because, you know, are we've moved teachers over to Forest Edge, but because we're reducing numbers in the other schools, we won't necessarily have to add teachers.
Well, classroom teachers will probably be neutral.
Okay.
But teachers who teach something specialized like art,
right,
we will have to hire a new teacher for positions like that.
Got it.
And that's in that 1.7.
Yeah, that's factored in that. Okay. And then as we grow and would have to add additional teachers to Forest Edge for the growth, your projections show that we're going to have the additional revenue to fund those. So that I just want to make sure as we're looking at this budget cycle and the $391,000 that we don't have to be careful to hold some of that for future years because we're anticipating revenue in those future years to fund that as opposed to not spending it now.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Have we thought about cycling back to Mark Roffler's and taking and say, here's our numbers, you know, are you still confident in the projections outward? You know, I have a confidence that, you know, the lag in a significant part is due to the year delay in Terra Vesta and the other groups. Just seeing how fast the basements are going up in Terra Vesta right now. I mean, there are 12 houses up already within 2 months. But I would think it would be worth cycling back to Mark with our January numbers and saying, oh, take a look and see where we're at.
We've actually been in touch quite frequently. And he has said that. I have some emails from him where he said that the number of years it will take us to get there might be off by a year or two, but we will still see the growth in his professional opinion.
I guess my other question too has to do with, as we get new enrollees, are we doing kind of an entrance survey in terms of what development did they move into, how many kids are in their families, so we can get a sense of pattern of families or non-families moving into these developments and what age kids are entering the district? I mean, I know it's going to be different, but that would be great information for us in terms of trends of, is Highlands of Netherwood more school-age kids, or is Terra Vesta? So we can also start to plan in terms of what these developments are turning into.
Well, that will help Mark because he factors in the multiplier per unit based on that information.
He does, and no one knows better than Katie what information we ask when people enroll, so we also ask sibling information.
Yeah, I think that would go into.
I'll touch base with Mark.
I think that would go into Mark's review because he's using in each of the neighborhoods a certain multiplier per student per unit factor. Yeah. Well,
I think we're gonna have to be careful not to micromanage it too, though. I think we need to let the season go by, and then benchmark. You know, when this building season goes by and it's September or October, then maybe benchmarking it. I think benchmarking it a month at a time is.
No, yeah, I think we do. We do a January count, we do a September count, right?
Yes, right. Yes.
3rd September would be a good time to get that because you're going to have a lot more houses up in Terravessa and Netherwood Heights or whatever they call that out there. Highlands of Netherwood, yes. It's not that high, actually, out there.
There's some hills.
Really?
There's some hills in there.
Not
Those are storm ponds.
Yeah.
Probably.
It's getting late. We're getting punchy.
Yeah. The only other thing I would mention is, it's good to measure impact on new construction, but what I really appreciated from Mark was that he also looks at the current housing load and houses turning over.
Yeah, and that would be the data that Katie gets. Right. Okay. Any other questions for Andy? Thanks for doing this, Andy. I know it kind of goes against your grain of making assumptions on economic stuff and having it in paper for you.
As long as you let me put the asterisk on everything,
yeah,
I'm all right.
It's noted that there's yeah, the royal we. But this serves two purposes. It tees it up for us. So now we're going to get the priorities, the recommendations from administration, knowing the dollars we have for the current budget year. But we have a look out from a planning purpose so that we kind of, when we're looking at priorities, we can look at whether we're going to have to defer some of those, and if we defer them, will there be the funds available to pick them up if they're important based on deferral. So thanks. Okay. That takes us into informational items, changing the name of the school district.
Gina, would you do the first 2 slides, and I'll do the what's next slide? Thank you.
Okay. Does this count as the first slide?
It should be, you would do 3, and I would do 1.
Okay. All right. I think that's fine. That's a good job for me. All right. So I was pleasantly surprised at the process for changing the name of a school district. So it is addressed in Wisconsin law in Chapter 115, and it says that the school board may, by a resolution, designate a different name for the school district as long as the phrase school district is in the name. So there is a lot of latitude that you have in terms of what the name of the district should be from a legal standpoint. Did you use it up in all your budget talk? Okay. So this is a sample resolution, and I want to thank Bob Butler at WASB for this because I did check in with him because it seemed so simple from a legal standpoint. And so we worked on this together, that this would be a sample resolution that the board would need to vote on as any other resolution. So from a legal standpoint, it's a relatively easy process. I think the harder question becomes from a communication community standpoint.
This would be slide 4. These are just top of mind suggestions, and I've had the opportunity to work with Erica on this, and I bring some experience that I've had in other districts that have made changes to their name, and obviously there needs to be a discussion period, and usually what districts have done is set aside a board meeting for some public comment. So we would do some, if this were something that you were interested in, we would do some marketing. And I'll just say, for example, at the March board meeting, we might accept public comment. You might want to accept public comment on changing the school district's name. Prior to that, I would work with Erica and perhaps a couple of board members to help frame, some of the message that we would get out in the Oregon Observer, as well as sending to all community members and parents. And to me, that's a critically important element of it. And then the board vote is really a very small process. accept that resolution from Bob Butler, you would think it's more complicated to change the school district name than what it really is, but it's not. And if the board were to do that, say the first board meeting in April, then we would work on the name change filing process, because this is a significant amount of work, and obviously we know when we get into the last bullet of operational changes, it's going to impact, contracts, websites, social media, signage, and branding. So while Erica has done some preliminary planning, we're not in a position to lay out a long, detailed plan, because we didn't want to spend a lot of time on it if it was something that the board wasn't looking at doing in the very near term. So again, a starting point would be, discussion, possible public comment at the March meeting. If you wanted to take action on it the first meeting in April, we could get queued up. We still think we're in a timeline for that. And then we'd get into the operational piece of what does that mean and everything that needs to change associated with the board name. So I'll stop and see if you have some feedback for us, or if you'd like to have any discussion on this. And if you have a question, I know Erica would be happy to answer as well.
One question I have is that if we adopted a resolution to change the name, and I think one of those suggestions I think Courtney put up was the Oregon Area School District, we don't have to do that. Okay, so there's an effective date, so it doesn't have to be the same day as the resolution, that we could designate when that would be effective. Okay.
Yes,
So-
and that is highly recommended that we have an
Yeah.
effective date.
Okay. It just makes sense, because that's the beginning of our fiscal year, number one. And number two, we're opening a new school. So if we're going to make a change to the name for naming purposes, or not naming purposes, but it's not branding either. What is it? Labeling? Yeah, because you're the marketing.
I'm sure you're
person.
shocked that I'm going to weigh in on this. A couple things. One, I think we really need to think about, if we're changing it to Oregon Area School District, that we look at the name for the high school, that it would be Oregon Area High School or Oregon Area Middle School. Those are the other two schools in our district that are general names. So I think we have to kind of pause a little bit about this and really think through that it's not just the district name, that it is those two schools that we might want to consider as well. I think we have a really strong brand with our 5 values, but we have a really outdated logo. And so Erica and I have talked about this too. So I think where this is something that we could do a resolution and we could do it really quickly as a matter of process, it might be something that gets referred to the visioning committee, or something that Brian talked about, that it's just a couple board members. But I think it's a really important thing, but we got to pause, and we also have to look at the budget associated with this, because it's not a small undertaking when you look at all the things that have the name on it. So I completely support an Oregon area, because we are a broad district and we represent how many municipalities, but I think we have to look at beyond just the school district name.
Anybody else with any thoughts?
Going back to the slide that had the process points, or Brian's slide, that one. When you talk about discussion, is that board discussion? Is that public discussion? What are you thinking in terms of that?
In terms of the public discussion, we really want to give the public something to react to, and that would fall under the public comment portion. We were thinking discussion. Well, we've had some general conversation about the Oregon Area School District. It would be nice if we knew that we're like an area the board or a name the board was zeroing in on, because then we can start to market that name, so to speak, and share information. I appreciate Krista's point in terms of the middle school and the high school. Likely no one sitting on this board will ever have to address the second high school in Oregon, but likely when the second middle school gets built, someone sitting on this board and administrators will need to address. It can no longer really be Oregon Middle School. That group will have to wrestle through that. So there are some pieces. To this. I will say I've lived through changing or having the name of the school district changed with the insertion of area twice, and it really is quite smooth, because most people understand. Yes, we're bigger than just one municipality. we're multiple municipalities, and it's going to take a little while for it all to catch up with us just from a budget and from a branding and naming process. Perhaps one of the easiest things to change is the website. In terms of quick changes, and it's going to take some time for us to grow through it. It's also a wonderful part of our story and our history in terms of our growth and development and how we really are. I think I have it right, 11 municipalities, or is it 9? 11. I think it's 11 municipalities and 3 rather significant communities in terms of Brooklyn, Fitchburg, and Oregon. Not that the townships, I live in a township, that's an important part of the community too, but not as visible as a municipality. So if we can move as fast or as slow as you would like, it might make sense, Steve, if the feedback's favorable that the board would like to do this, to get a small committee together to work with Gina and Erica and myself, and we could make it happen with a landing point at that April meeting. But I yield to the wishes of the board. I just wanted to give you a slide that showed the possibility of us doing it on a shorter timeline.
The Courtney's suggestion, and I think we batted this around for a while as a board, about moving to the Oregon area school district. I mean, are members on board with, exploring that? Anybody opposed going forward? Okay, and so I think if we could put that on the March agenda for more discussion and public comment type, and I think it's really kind of falls within the visioning committee too, in terms of working that. But I like, Chris, I'd like to have you involved as well, just given your marketing background. So, and this is one of the things where, when we have a committee meeting, anybody can show up and do that. So why don't we target that first meeting in March to further explore this, have this on the agenda, make sure we get, some publicity that, the board's contemplating moving to this change, and that we're going to be working through some logistics stuff to do that, with the anticipation of maybe doing that in April with an effective date in July. Assuming things fall in line. If they don't, we can call a stop to it. But since the final process is so easy, let's see if the underlying things that need to be done can be made within that time. Okay? Everybody good? All right. That takes us to school leadership team reports, right? We're just at the meeting.
This is just a super quick informational item. As soon as I get to my agenda, I'm there. Just a reminder, board members, May 14th and May 19th from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, right here in the Innovation Center, we'll do the 2019/20 school leadership team reports, and we'll set that up in a similar way. Leslie and I will be meeting with Dr. Rickabaugh in a little while to put the final touches on that, and building principals and school leadership teams are excited about making those collaborative reports to you. So that takes care of item number 2. Would you like me to keep going on superintendent update?
All right, you go ahead. Yeah.
This is really quick. I just have 4 items. First, another in a series of the public thank yous to our work group. It is so important, and I've long been a believer that work groups, committees, task forces, blue ribbon commissions, whatever you want to call them, getting groups of community members along with staff and board members together to address big issues for us. And this school start and end time is a big issue. I think the group did a wonderful job in their presentation tonight. They've laid out a wealth of information for board members to consider. I'll work closely with Steve and Dr. Bergstrom to make sure that all of your questions are answered and you're well prepared for the meeting on March 9th. In terms of a second item, I have the privilege of sharing with you a recognition that one of our students received, and to me it's always exciting when we can remember the focus and the center part of our role. And Jenna Statz from Oregon High School, she is the winner of the 2019 American Family Servant Leadership Award for her academic, athletic, and servant leadership. And there's a quote on that I'll read to you. It says, "Outside of sports, Jenna has been very active in our school community and the community of Oregon. She has been a leader on and off the field, and we have selected her for numerous sportsmanship opportunities." And that quote comes from our athletic director, Mike Carr. Additionally, a little background information. I know most of you know Jenna. She's a basketball and soccer student athlete. She's a member of our student council and link crew. And listen to this, I didn't say it wrong. I'm going to say it right. She has completed 200 hours of community service. And remember, our requirement is 40 hours. So I'll send this along. And she's identified as a local dreamer in the American Family program. Then a couple of other quick items. I'm guessing some of you had the opportunity to see our Oregon High School play this past week, Our Town. It's directed by Mike Doucette from the high school. I've learned 38 students were involved in the Old Town production, and it was the last bow on the OHS theater stage for 7 graduating seniors. So I will send that along, and we'll go this way. And then this Friday, Brooklyn's 4th grade play is happening at 1 o'clock, Katie, in the afternoon, and 6:30 in the PAC. It's the journey of the noble Narble, and over 40 7th, 4th graders will be performing, and it's directed by Caitlin Rutz. And I have a picture of a couple of parents and students who were working on Saturday to create the set. So if you have some availability with that, it would be great to see it. And then my last item, you've heard it from Andy and a little bit from Steve in terms of next year's staffing plan. Tomorrow, Wednesday, the administrative team, we had to reschedule our meeting from tomorrow to Wednesday. We are going to put the final touches on the staffing plan for the 2020-21 school year. We will bring the first draft of that, including some of Andy's financial information, to the board at the March 9th meeting. Typically at that March 9th meeting, you provide us with some feedback. You don't have to provide us with all the feedback, but also an opportunity for you to think about questions over the next couple of weeks. Get them to Steve. Steve will send them to Dr. Bergstrom and myself, and we will be ready for you to take action at the first meeting in April. So if you have questions, ideas, you now know from Andy that there's a little additional money available in terms of the allocation pot because of the favorable reduction in health insurance. So with that, I'll stop, see if you have any questions. And I know we are late in the night, so I will not go on.
Any questions for Brian? Okay, agenda for, remember tomorrow night we have a expulsion hearing at 6:30, and that would be over at the district office. So those of you who have signed up, make sure you show up, and if you're not going to, let us know so that we have a quorum. And then for our March 9th meeting, we'll have as an action item the school start time. We'll also add on to the agenda the school naming or the district renaming item. And are we going to get staffing?
Yes.
Yeah, staffing. So that
The first draft.
first cut of staffing. So might be another long meeting. Okay, and we'll work on kind of structuring that. Don't go yet, Kevin. So yeah. No, we're going to do checkout. So if anybody else has anything for the agenda, let us know. But that's our only meeting in March, so we'll be kind of busy. So checkout. I'm going to go first just because I want to introduce someone. Kevin Maring, raise your hand. You were the guy stuff. Kevin's running for school board unopposed, and so thank you for coming. Kevin, we usually don't go this late. Okay, so that, and then everybody, Heather was here early. She was part of the working group, and so we know Heather also is running, and she's unopposed as well. So I'm done with checkout. Anna? Troy? Courtney? Barb? Tim? Krista. One more item to do. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned at 9:18. Thanks, everyone. Good meeting.